Welcome, you're a one-on-one with Wes the Sports Guy here on YouTube and online all the time at westhesportsguy.com. I got a lot to get through this week here for episode 9 of One-on-One with Wes the Sports Guy. I'm going to break down the conference finals real quick in the NBA and the Stanley Cup playoffs just getting underway this weekend. In the NBA, you've got the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics going at it in the East. Out West, you have the Golden State Warriors and the Houston Rockets going at it. Two best teams in that conference when you look at it record-wise, and really talent-wise, they have been the two best teams the entire season out in the Western Conference. In the East, the Cleveland Cavaliers finished as the 4th seed in their respective conference, behind Philadelphia, Boston, and Toronto, respectively. Cleveland swept the Raptors, the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, to get to the East to play the Boston Celtics, who beat the 76ers, a former arch rival, in 5 games rather easily. When you look at the way that series played out, the Boston Celtics have been playing amazing basketball this entire run so far in the playoffs without their two best players, arguably in Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward. Hayward, as you probably know, has been missing the entire season ever since having a devastating leg injury in the first game of the year for Boston. Kyrie Irving's been out for the year for quite some time now. He almost played half of the season for the Celtics, but had to bow out to a knee injury that ended up costing him the rest of the season for the Celtics. But the young guns are stepping up, and also they have a good veteran presence in Al Horford in the middle. They're playing excellent basketball right now, and they are definitely one of the better teams to go head-to-head against Cleveland so far in their run to get back to the NBA Finals once again, which, beginning of the year, I predicted to have Cleveland and Golden State once again in the NBA Finals 4 straight years in a row. I didn't predict them to be in the finals 4 straight years in a row, but chances are they're probably going to get back at it again. And looking at the East, the way the Cavs are playing just with LeBron James by himself, they are tough to stop. And when you totally destroy Toronto the way they did, it's looking pretty good for them to get back into the not the conference, but the NBA Finals to win another championship. That would be 2 in 3 years for the Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron James at the helm. Whereas in the West, you've got the Golden State Warriors going against the Houston Rockets, probably the only team that could match them game for game, player for player to a certain degree. Obviously, the Warriors have 4 legitimate guys that can go off at any given time, and Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and, oh, by the way, Kevin Durant, last year's Finals MVP for the Warriors, beating the Cavaliers. Whereas the Rockets, they do have James Harden. They have Eric Gordon coming off the bench. They also have a pretty good point guard by the name of Chris Paul. This is the first time he is playing at a conference finals in his distinguished NBA career, which is hard to believe, but not surprising at all for a guy of that talent to have the reputation that he has. But again, kind of shocking he's not playing the conference finals yet until now. But it should be a good series. I have the Warriors and Rockets going into at least 6 games. I still have the Warriors getting on top of that one. I do have the Cavs beating the Celtics in 7. I don't think it's going to be as easy as it was against Toronto for them. But regardless, they both should be very highly touted, highly competitive series between those two in each conferences. But again, I've got Golden State and Cleveland representing the NBA Finals for 4 years in a row. Never happened. It's never happened 3 years in a row, let alone 4. Moving on in the Stanley Cup Finals, or playoffs actually, not quite the finals, but the conference finals. Winnipeg Jets and Vegas Golden Knights. Who had that in the beginning of the season? I certainly didn't. In fact, I didn't even have the right matchups for the Stanley Cup Finals, let alone the conference finals. But regardless, it should be a very, very competitive series again, whereas Winnipeg, they beat the Nashville Predators, the defending Western Conference champs, in 7 games in their matchup in the semifinals, or second round as the NHL likes to call it now. It's technically the semifinals. Vegas took care of San Jose, a division rival, not just a conference rival, but division rival in the second round. Vegas is an expansion franchise, mind you, and this is as far and as good a season as you can have in your inaugural year in any sport, let alone hockey, which is as competitive as it's ever been in its entire existence, having 31 teams vying for a Stanley Cup championship in any given year. In the East, you've got the Washington Capitals and Tampa Bay Lightning going at it. I didn't expect the Capitals to get this far this year. I thought the Penguins were going to take care of them in the semifinals, but Washington got over that hurdle and finally beat the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're now playing the Tampa Bay Lightning. I've got Tampa Bay winning the series in 6 games. Tampa Bay is just stacked from top to bottom. It's going to be hard to get past them at any given point, let alone in the 7-game series. I think Tampa Bay is just too good for any team right now in the NHL. In the Western Conference, you've got Winnipeg, or I've got Winnipeg losing to the Vegas Golden Knights. It's a great story regardless, whoever wins. The lone Canadian team is Winnipeg. I think it's going to have to wait another year for that to happen. Vegas is just a solid defensive team, and they capitalize on your mistakes. Winnipeg made some mistakes against Nashville, which they did capitalize on some games on those mistakes, but I think Vegas is just too opportunistic. They are going to capitalize on it. And Marc-Andre Fleury in net is just playing out of his mind right now. You haven't seen him play like this since the Pittsburgh Penguins won their first Stanley Cup with the regime that they have right now with Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and then Fleury was in net. That was a huge reason why they ended up winning another Stanley Cup when Marc-Andre Fleury was in net playing the way he did, and Vegas has got that right now. It's just hard to defeat that. Time for the segment that makes you think critically and differently to a degree. Do you remember?
You remember?
Do you remember when the San Diego Chargers fired Marty Schottenheimer after a 14-2 season? Now, it wasn't directly after the season. They still played a playoff game, mind you, but it was a divisional round matchup against the New England Patriots, who would go on to win a Super Bowl that year. But the way in which the Chargers lost that game was kind of shocking to everybody, and it shouldn't have happened, but it happened. The Chargers lost to the Patriots. I could bore you with the details of that game, but regardless, the score said the Chargers lost that game. Fair and square. What did the Chargers ended up doing? They fired Marty Schottenheimer, thinking that it was the coach's fault for them not winning a playoff game. And Marty's had a distinguished NFL career as a head coach, not just with the San Diego Chargers, but also with the Kansas City Chiefs, and even before that, the Cleveland Browns. Now, he's been the scapegoat of a lot of his regimes in the NFL, which doesn't diminish his legacy. He's still one of the best NFL head coaches of all time, in my opinion. He's not the best, because there's that playoff record hanging above his head. It's just not good. And it's going to hang with him for the rest of his career, if he does decide to come back, and the rest of his life as well. But he's not going to, be a Debbie Downer about it. He owns up to it. He doesn't shy away from it. But yet, I compare that now to what happened to the Toronto Raptors head coach, Dwayne Casey. They had a 59-win season. That is the most by far in franchise history. They had the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. They got through their first round matchup pretty easily. And then they got swept again 2 years in a row by the Cleveland Cavaliers, and specifically LeBron James. It wasn't just the Cleveland Cavaliers, although they did have some help along the way. LeBron does have Kevin Love, another potential superstar, with him on that team. But looking at it as a whole, everybody doesn't think it was justified to fire Dwayne Casey. Well, the only reason why it's considered justified is because you can't dismantle an entire roster. You have to go with what you can change at this given time, and you fire the head coach. Now, he only had 1 year left on his deal, worth, I think, about $3 million supposedly. So it was an easy move for the Raptors to make rather than dismantling the entire roster. Organizations usually don't dismantle an entire roster, especially when they've had such a successful season, but a terrible run in the playoffs. Now, I know you could point out the Florida Marlins / Miami Marlins, whatever they want to call themselves now. They've dismantled their teams twice, but that was after winning championships, which still doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? Well, there's a lot of cost-cutting measures and things of that nature that I don't want to get into with the Marlins, and then plus that's a different sport, as is football is a different sport too, but that's the best example I can come up with of why would you fire a head coach after a successful season and actually a successful run with that franchise. Dwayne Casey's had it for quite some time with the Raptors. Now, he's not going to be out of a job very long unless he chooses to just sit out and wait another year, and then he can choose the job that's basically going to be made for him at some point. There are openings available right now that he could take, and he can easily find a much better position to be in than the Toronto Raptors. It boggles my mind that they even got the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. But then again, that's the Eastern Conference in the NBA now. The competition's not that good. Why do you think we've had the same opponents in the finals for almost a decade now in the East. And what's the theme of those teams that are getting the finals representing the Eastern Conference? LeBron James, Miami, and Cleveland. So don't blame it all on the head coach, but also don't get upset that the head coach got fired. It happens, and it's not the right way sometimes, but again, a team is not going to dismantle an entire roster because of their performance in the playoffs. They're going to have to go a different route, and unfortunately, sometimes the head coach does get it. Time for my feel-good story of the week, and this comes from Major League Baseball. A bit of a somber story to start out with. This is in regards to Oakland A's outfielder Stephen Piscotty. Just a little bit of a backstory with him. He was playing with the St. Louis Cardinals to start out his baseball career for a few years. He ended up getting traded this past offseason to the Oakland Athletics, and it was no secret. One of the reasons why he got traded was to be closer to his mother, Gretchen, who lives in Pleasanton, California, which is pretty close to where the Oakland Athletics play. And essentially, the reason why he wanted to be closer to his mother is because she was diagnosed with ALS, otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease. So it was a win-win for both the St. Louis Cardinals and Stephen Piscotty, which helped him out at that regard and also allowed him to still continue playing baseball, but also closer vicinity to his mother. Unfortunately, his mother did pass away on May 6th from the disease. And when Stephen Piscotty came back, his first game with the Oakland Athletics, being at home at the Coliseum, he had a very touching moment in his first at-bat, and he ended up getting a single against the Houston Astros in that first at-bat. And, of course, his father was there. Fans, even the opponent, Houston Astros, were all in support of him, gave him a nice rounding standing ovation when he stepped up to the batter's box before he got that single in his first at-bat of the game. Afterwards, had a simple explanation for the stirring gesture that he gave when he was in the batter's box, thanking the crowd and the opponents as well for the applause. Quote, "The hand over my heart, that's something that my mom would do when she wasn't able to speak. It was just, I love you and thank you. That's what I did in the box. I'm going to keep that with me." End quote. My utmost thoughts and prayers are going out to the Piscotty family since hearing of this, and I also want to make sure I get this right and telling you that you can donate to a cure for the disease of Lou Gehrig's disease, otherwise known as ALS. They're doing a what you could call a crowdfunding contributions to help fight the disease at youcaring.com. I want to make sure I get this right. youcaring.com/ALS Therapy Development Institute. It's also at the bottom of your screen. youcaring.com ALS Therapy Development Institute, in memory of Gretchen Piscotty. Donate what you can. And this weekend being Mother's Day, I also implore you to not just text your mother, but talk to your mom. Call her, FaceTime with her, Skype her, instant message, video chat, all that stuff, but just you don't need to send a text message. Just talk to your mom. She's always there for you. It's time for us to be there for them. And Godspeed to the Piscotty family. Have a great weekend. To my mom, to your mom, happy Mother's Day. Hope you have a great one. I will see you next week for episode 10 here on 101 with Wes the Sports Guy at youtube.com and also at westhesportsguy.com.